Hey, everybody, Merry Christmas. I am so glad that you're joining us online. We try to do this end of the year Sunday virtually for you because people are traveling in and out and different holiday things. And so this is a way we still have something for Adobe family to connect to, but also it gives you the freedom, have a Sunday off. And we're not taking it off. It's just we're out and about throughout the world, which is a great idea because in this coming year, we're focusing on a new Adobe core value of living on mission. And so I'll talk a little bit about that for you today, but also I just want to focus on what's coming in the new year for you. And so it won't be a full 30-minute message. We'll keep it a little shorter for you as you're watching online, maybe as you're traveling to and from different places, but I'm so glad that you're with us. And I do want to just thank you here at the end of the year for being part of Adobe, whether you've been here for years or this was your first year at Adobe. This has just been a great year. We have so many great people. And so I just want to thank you. Amanda and I and our family are so blessed to get to be your pastors. And I'm just really excited about what the Lord has in store for us in 2025. Can you believe that? We're a quarter of the way through the 100 years. And so my goodness, it seems like it wasn't that long ago. We came here a little over 3 years ago. And so it's flying by. But I do believe this year, 2025, coming up, as we shift to our core value, living on mission and what that means. We'll talk about it in January and the coming months and what it means to go represent Jesus everywhere you go. And the way that you're living your life is a representation of Christ. And then what that means to invite people to follow Jesus as you follow Jesus, or to bring them to church or different events. And I can tell you this, the year 2025 is going to be an event-driven year. It's not my normal cup of tea, but I think for a year, we're really going to focus on doing things that you can invite people to come to church to who maybe don't normally go to church. So that's coming up. You can look forward to that. I can tell you right now, 4 times next year, we're going to have Fifth Sundays. And on Fifth Sundays, we're going to be doing food trucks. So Fifth Sunday food trucks is what we're calling it. So we'll just have different food trucks come out, maybe 2 or 3 each Sunday on those Fifth Sundays is a way to get you to stay, hang out, get to know some people who are part of the church a little bit better and have food from different food trucks. So really excited about that. Those Sundays will be more outsider oriented. So we'll want you to invite friends to come that year. But also we're going to be looking in the early half of the year to be rolling out house churches for everybody as well. And so you may have heard about it and you may have thought to yourself, like, how come I'm not invited? Why can't I be in one? They're coming to everybody in 2025. So excited about that too, as we want you to have opportunities to talk about Jesus, to live on mission outside of the church. And then our sermon calendar for 2025, if you're like a deep seasoned Christian, you may be looking at it and thinking like, it seems kind of surface level. We're really going to try to answer spiritual questions that people are asking who might not know Jesus or who are new to faith. And so you may come and feel like it's a little bit like milk rather than meat. And that's why we want you to be able to get into a house church is we're going to offer meat, some deep spiritual stuff in different ways throughout the year. But the Sundays are really going to focus for people who don't know Jesus, because we're going to assume that you're bringing them in to church with you. And so when they come, we want the message to be surrounded by something they're dealing with in life, something they're asking about God, something they don't know about the Bible or God. And so I'm really excited to preach all year long these messages that are hopefully answering a core value question that people are feeling in their hearts and in their lives. So get ready for the coming year. We hope you'll plan to join us all year long, but the year is going to look like that. It's going to be a year on mission. And then we're going to continue to build on the previous core values that we've built on for authentic community. We want you to build real friendships with people in the church. And we want you to have a real relationship as part of the body of Christ. And then last year, this current year we're in right now was a year of making disciples. And so So we want to continue that as well, help you to be a disciple who makes disciples as we look on living on mission in the coming year. So thank you. Here's what I want to talk about. In the new year, we're launching a new Bible reading plan. And if you can track through the core values, you got A, authentic community, you got D, disciple makers, you got O, on mission. Next year, 2026, so right, we're already ahead of you, is we're Bible believers. And so we're going to be reading through the entire Bible together, cover to cover, in 2026. All the Sundays, I'm going to preach through the Bible reading plan. So every Sunday will be something that we've read that week. And so in preparation for that year, two years still now out, 2026, we want you this year for our church Bible reading plan. We've read the New Testament about 6 times in the last 2 years. And so this year, we're going to read the Old Testament for the year, just one time. We're trying to space it out for you. We're working hard to make it so it's not like too crazy for you, but we want to build up some of that Bible reading muscle, because in the following year, we're going to read the whole Bible cover to cover. And there's a lot of the Bible, and to read it in a year, you got to really hunker down and dedicate yourself to doing that. And the reward is in reading the Bible. But I do think we're going to build in also, if you're able to read through the Old Testament with us this year, we'll have an end of the year celebration dinner. And that will also be in preparation for when we do the Bible reading plan cover to cover, whole Bible. We'll have a huge celebration at the end for anyone who feels like they complete that at the end of that year. So the Bible is super important for you to read. It's why we have a Bible reading plan. We want people reading the same things. As a church, God's doing the same thing in all of us through our church, and he's speaking to us in different ways. And so this year, as we do the Old Testament, I've run into some things in the last couple of years here where I've heard people say things like, oh, I don't really read the Old Testament. Oh, I don't really like the Old Testament. I had a great conversation with someone recently, said, I don't know if I like the God of the Old Testament. And so as we get ready to read the Old Testament front to end in 2025, I thought maybe we'd take a few minutes in this virtual Sunday message that we have to address some of those things and to encourage you that there is great value in reading the Old Testament and understanding who God is and how he interacted with his people before Jesus came. And so a couple of things to note for you, because you might be watching this. It might already be after Jan 1. Maybe you're getting, you're behind already. You're like, I forgot about the Bible reading plan. I didn't get my bookmark in time. We'll get it out to you virtually beforehand. But let me tell you this. There are going to be some really challenging parts or seasons during this year as we're reading through the Old Testament. That are they're challenging pieces of literature. So there's some amazing history. You're going to read about the story of God and his people and the things they did. And I think it's really engaging just as a fictional work or as a non-fictional work of history, of things that take place. And so as you read that, you can be encouraged and excited just by the story that you're reading. There's also great truth, and God speaks clearly to people in the Old Testament, and they respond in faith, and there's amazing stuff, but there's also like the book of Numbers. And I think the first 9 chapters of the book of Numbers are names. It's this guy was the dad of this guy, and then this guy was the dad of this guy, and 9 chapters. So let me set you free right now. If you got to skim that and not read it word for word, we're not going to ding you. God's not going to be like, oh, they didn't really give me their best today. We want you to give what you can and to try to read as much as you can each day of the plan for that day. And the more you read the Bible, the better off you'll be. So I encourage you, even on those ones, there's some value in some of it. You might read a name, and then that might trigger you to go study something different, where you say, oh, yeah, I don't know who Jehoshaphat is. Let me go see where else he is in the Bible, or whatever that looks like. And so I would just encourage you, even on the hard parts, there's going to be some, in the book of Exodus, it's just measurements for how things are supposed to be sized as they're building different things. it's not the most exciting. You're going to read some literature that's apocalyptic. You're going to read some that's dreams. You're going to read some that it seems super crazy. You're going to read prophecy about Jesus coming later. And you might read stuff that you don't understand, and that's okay. But I do think there's value in the Old Testament. It reveals the nature of God and his character and how much he loves you and I. And so I want to encourage you, don't pull away as you hear we're going to be reading the Old Testament. Plug in and see what God might be able to speak to you. There's going to be some hard spots. There's some things God tells his people to do that maybe don't feel like they're in line with the way you and I are living our lives since Jesus has come. And so I want you to understand sin is not acceptable in the presence of God. And so in the Old Testament, Jesus hasn't come. There's not really forgiveness for it yet. And so you had to be perfect by the law, and people couldn't do it. And so God judges sin harshly in the Old Testament. And so as you read this, sometimes people think like, man, God's so angry. Like, I don't like the God of the Old Testament. God is the same God. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 8 says, Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so I want to encourage you in this idea that you do like the God of the Old Testament. He's the same God. He's the God that we serve. What you don't like is the system that people were under, and what you should really appreciate is that Jesus has come and set us free from that. You're not under the law. Jesus came, he fulfilled it. And so we're in this era of like God dealt with the sin in our lives through the punishment that Jesus freely took. And so anytime you see something like sin being judged harshly or punished in the Old Testament, I would encourage you to take it for what it was. This is how God had to deal with it back then. History throughout humankind has been incredibly violent. It's been a hard time to live throughout history. We're in a great time to live. And so look at that and be like, Lord, thank you that I wasn't born in that era. Thank you that Jesus has come. Thank you that you don't deal with me that same way, even when I fall short. And so it should be a way to encourage you as you're reading through those hard spots. And then I've also heard this, and then I'll wrap it up for you. I've heard people say, I don't read the Old Testament. It's not for me. I want to encourage you. It is for you. The Lord speaks to us through the whole Bible. The whole Bible is the Word of God. And there is incredible, rich things in the Old Testament that God wants to speak to you. And so I think some of the characters in the Old Testament are fascinating. I think the way God works with people is fascinating. I think God speaks to us through that. And so if I could encourage you, would you give God a chance? Would you give me a chance? Would you give the Bible reading plan a chance? Would you consider reading the Old Testament with us in this year? We're going to space it out. I'm looking at it right now. Let me look at it. It looks like a few chapters a day. Sometimes it's one chapter. Sometimes it's two. If you get into some of the Psalms, there's 6 or 7, but they're short ones. And so it's not a lot. It should be about 10-ish minutes a day. It's just a way for you to connect with the Lord. It'll all be on the website, so you can click the link if you don't know where to find it. If you don't have a bookmark, we'll have bookmarks every quarter for you, along with a prayer guide for different missionaries we support in ministries. And so that'll be available. So if you've said in the past, I don't read the Old Testament, get rid of that. That's not a good mindset. And you're going to lay that aside. And in 2025, you're going to start reading the Old Testament in preparation for us to read the whole Bible cover to cover together in 2026. God is the same in the Old Testament as he is today. He just deals with sin differently because Jesus has already paid the price. And in the coming year, we're going to focus on living on mission, being Jesus to other people when we're not in the church. We're going to have events to invite them to. We're going to make it your classic attractional church model where come to us. My pastor will tell you about Jesus. We'll pray for you. We'll have an altar call response at the end of every single service, every Sunday, all year long, where we will give people the opportunity. If you don't know Jesus, we want to give you the chance to make that decision right now. That is going to be 2025. I'm so glad you're with us. I hope you'll continue to be on this journey alongside us in the new year. I just know that God has incredible things for you. He loves you. He has plans for you. And whether the trials are coming or whether it's going to be a year of victory, I don't know that, but I do know that when we have Jesus, every year is a good year. And so We love you. We appreciate you. We're so glad you're part of God's family and the Adobe family. I hope you had a great Christmas. I pray you have an incredible new year. God bless you, and we will see you for Waffle Sunday in January.